Lindsay, we're live.
Alive.
Does that scare you?
Not even remotely.
You know, it's not scary. Like if I'm standing in front of 250 or 300 people, I get a little nervous. But I can't see those people, right? So we're live on StreamYard. I can't see those people. That doesn't make me nervous. Just talking to you.
Right. Well, it's like being on stage. You know, you're blinded by the lights and you can't see the whole crowd. But if the house lights come on, it's a different story.
Exactly right.
Like,
Now that
blinded by the lights, we're fine.
Yeah, I've always kind of went by the adage when presenting live, not live like this, but with an audience. Memorize the first 30 and the last 30, and the rest of it you're kind of winging, right? So it usually takes me those 30 seconds to kind of go, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
Right. And then I can roll with the agenda in my mind, not the script, right? But the first 30 and last 30, I try to script out. So
right.
Cool. Well, today, right, for our many viewers, I don't know who's out there, we're on StreamYard. If you haven't used this technology, I love it. We're streaming to 5 different locations right now. I still haven't figured out the Zoom integration, but I'll do that before our guest webinar with Marie Swift next week. So we can do a webinar and stream that as well. Today's all about personalized content. And I'm excited about this conversation, Lindsay. First off, let me kind of introduce you, right? Because I've been around for a long time for our audience. Mindy's been around for 3 or 4 years for our audience. You're new to the team,
yes, I am.
Relatively speaking. Right. So the branding side of what we do is so important. Mark Benishek, good to see you too, brother. The branding side of what we do is so important, right? So we can build large target niche networks, which we talked about last week. Mindy and I went over the importance of building that ideal community of COIs and prospects, and just as easy to influence 10,000 people as it is 10 people nowadays with technology. Now we have to talk about how we influence them, right? So, and in large part, that's a brand play, and personalized content with social media is so important. Lindsay, I'm super stoked to have you on our team. It's been 3 or 4 months at this point?
Yeah, about 4 months now. Yep.
You have revolutionized the way we provide content, the way we develop content for our clients. You've brought a branding expertise and experience that we didn't have prior. So, for the world, Lindsay McAndrew, our director of content and brand services, welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of Social Advisors.
Thanks for having me. It's a fun team to be a part of. I've been enjoying my time so far. It's definitely been interesting to kind of reframe the entire structure of our department, but that's kind of the fun in it, right? I love the idea of kind of burning something down and starting all over again and making something. I don't know that we burned it down necessarily, but I would say we went in there and retooled a hell of a lot of it. So it's been fun. I like get my hands dirty.
It's been good. And, if we go back 9 years to when this all started, we were a content company and have been for 9 years, though that's looked very different over the years. There was a point where, and I'm talking 6, 7 years ago, we developed a bunch of content and the client comes and says, great, I love the content you develop. When does that turn into clients? And you go, gosh, we better figure out how to create some engagement, right? So that we can not only create the content, but put in front of a large audience. And so that really turned us to, LinkedIn dominantly because it's so good for the advisors we serve, but also Facebook and Twitter, and in some cases, Instagram. We haven't really had a chance with TikTok yet, but I'm sure that's coming. So advisors out there, you can't use TikTok, most of you, but you can reserve your handle on TikTok. So that's my recommendation there, is make sure you reserve the name you're going to use when compliance allows you to do TikTok as well. So we really kind of pivoted, still did content, but our focus became that engagement, building a large audience, getting in front of the right audience. It's come full circle, right? Because, a couple of years ago, content became really so much more instrumental, especially as more and more and more and more advisors are using these platforms. The content creates that huge differentiator.
Right.
Yeah. So awesome. Hey, I'm going to kind of kick this off. I want to talk about why personalized content, kind of get into that a little bit. And of course, we're going to lean on your expertise to talk about what and how.
Right.
So I'll take care of the why, and then we'll turn the stage over to you, Lindsay. But 2020, for those of you pay attention, FINRA's number, 687,000 financial advisors, registered financial advisors. Now, that includes RIAs. So FINRA registrations, I think, is 617,000, the remainder being RIAs. Not everybody's practicing, admittedly, right? But that's a lot of competition. That's a lot of people. Let's say it's half those people practicing, 350,000 people practicing financial planning, wealth management in our country. Whew, I think that's probably the third most competitive professional services industry, behind real estate first and legal second.
That's substantial.
Yeah, that's a lot, right? So everybody knows an advisor, right? You got a lot of competition, even if you live in a small town.
And the world is remote now too. So even if it's not local competition, if you're seeing clients across the country remote, I mean, competition's everywhere.
Yeah, what does it get to? What, it doesn't take much to get licensed in a new state if you've got a new opportunity there, right? So, the best way that I've found to cut through that competition is by getting narrow. Everybody talks about choosing a niche, right? Get narrow on the people you serve. If you get narrow on the people you serve, you cut out the competition. Of course, there's going to be others that serve that narrow audience. Doctors at a certain hospital, business owners in a certain industry, whatever that may be, state employees, government employees. Get narrow in a niche. You remove a good portion of that competition. And then the other thing that does is, when you create content, it allows you to speak very personally to that audience that is becoming familiar with your brand. At some point, it takes a little time, but at some point in the footprint, in the geographic area that you're prospecting and building your business, there's cases where you become de facto, right? You work with dentists. Well, if you belong to the association, you show up at their shows, you push content, you build your network, pretty soon you're the dentist's advisor.
Yep.
Right? They're not going elsewhere. And what's your competition there? Pretty minimal, right? So that is, such an important case for very highly personalized and customized content. Right. Now, here's the other piece of that, right? The regulators. Now, Lindsay, you're fairly new to financial services, right? You got a little background in that prior to coming to us. Of course, you're drinking from a fire hose as far as that's concerned now. You are not new to building professional brands. What's your impression of financial services with 120 days under your belt? And of course, I'm feeding you every bit of knowledge I possibly can. What's your impression of building brands in this industry versus others?
There's a lot of red tape, obviously. I think it's a matter of working collaboratively with people who maybe know more than I do about that red tape. We also know that goalpost is always changing, right?
That's
so
right.
This month's restrictions aren't next month's restrictions necessarily. Part of what I've learned that we do is, we've got people dedicated to staying on top of that. Like, what is that? Because we're creating new content. Everything is brand new. Everything we're generating is with new information. So if we're not following along with what that restriction is that month, and sometimes it's just as simple as, I didn't think something was promissory language, but it is promissory language. And really learning and understanding the regulations and why they exist have been a big hurdle, but not so much so that we can still create some pretty killer content around that red tape. And I think that might be a misconception when it comes to this particular industry. A lot of the advisors I meet with, they're like, yeah, but compliance. I'm like, I've got compliance. We're here to talk about you, your brand, who you are. Yeah. And I think that's kind of one of the cool thing is that we're able to find that brand and do it within the confines of each particular compliance.
Yeah, and every firm's different, right? So we've got several layers: RIAs, SEC, for independent advisors, FINRA, the firm. And I'll tell you, we create content not for a lot, but we create content for Jones advisors. Mm-hmm. We create content for Merrill advisors. We create content for Morgan advisors. Now, everything we create, of course, they've got to submit through whatever compliance portal is there. So it's all signed off on by compliance prior to it posting. But it brings us to a conversation about the regulators and furthermore about canned content. Right. So I got started doing websites 1998, right? I mean, for advisors, you know, Morgan was a client, Smith Barney was a client, RBC, Dane Rauscher, Hilliard Lyons. I mean, a bunch of firms that don't even exist anymore, right? Content marketing existed, of course, long before that. But when we were developing websites for these firms, it was templated, data-driven, stamped out. Everybody got the same thing. How that has evolved in, you know, the last 22, 23 years. But the regulators at FINRA and our compliance make the canned content available to advisors, third party as well, right? We've got Advisor Stream and FMG and, you know, and Snappy and a bunch of others that are pushing content out. In the case of canned content, I'm going to tell you there was a time and you know, not too long ago that even those advisors who were, let me say, taking the lazy way out, because, you know, that's what it is, right? You check the box, sure, just schedule my content, push it out. Most of them aren't even reviewing what's going out, right? At least there was a brand presence associated with that, right? So John Smith, financial advisor, whether they were reviewing or not the content that was being posted tomorrow, at least they knew they had a presence.
Right.
I think, Lindsay, that impact of that canned content has changed, right? So in the case of some of these third-party vendors who have like 250 pieces of FINRA non-object content, some of them 50, 60, 70,000 clients, right? Some of the big ones are sharing the exact same content, you know, 250 pieces of content. I can tell you, there's 2 days out of the month that I get like a dozen or 15 advisor newsletters, and they come on the exact same day and they're the exact same content. So there was the adage a year ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, 10 years ago, that just check the box, put your content out there.
Yep.
I will tell you that I think that's got a negative impact now.
Well, it does. And I think that's the thing. It's like the landscape of social media and how we use it is always changing.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, 5, 6 years ago, it was just make sure there's a presence, always be posting, follow a schedule, this, that, and the next thing. And 5 years later, it's not that way anymore.
Right.
And we've learned that. And if you're not evolving with it, you're really not utilizing social media for what it is. And like you said, you're hurting your brand now.
Yeah. Now a prospect sees that as lazy.
Right.
Right. There's nothing.
You just get lost. You just get lost. I mean, your content doesn't stand out. You're not reaching your target demographic.
Yeah.
And when people go and they look at your page, they don't know anything about you.
Yeah.
They know not a thing. Yeah.
Well, and you and Mindy and I chatted about it yesterday. You told me not to talk about it, but I'm going to anyway. Shadow banning, right?
Yeah.
So when everything is, and I don't know the intimate details on LinkedIn's algorithm, right? So I'm not going to pretend that I know all the details on the algorithm. But if you've got like this consistent automation, they're trying to get rid of bots. Right. So if you're simply automating content, that's just one more thing that could ding against you, and frankly, make sure that invites aren't going out, make sure that content's not being seen, right? They're trying to cut down on that bot usage. And so we had a discussion about shadow banning yesterday, and just setting it and forget it could actually frankly be working heavily against you. Not just lazy branding, not just lazy activity, and it's easy to see, but actually effectively limiting the exposure of that brand.
Right.
So
I mean, there's a lot of ways. And I just, at this point, you know, halfway through 2022, to me, there's just no excuse to be using canned content anymore. You're paying for it. Yeah. Why pay for something that's not going to work for you? Right. Yeah. It's supposed to be an investment.
Yeah.
Where our money goes. And especially for financial advisors, right? You think of your money in terms of an investment. When you spend your money on canned content, that's not an investment. Right. You just handed them your money and said, "Here, take it," because it's not working for you. Yeah. You know, you've just purchased, the same stuff everybody else is.
That's exactly it. Yep. No one wants to read an academic article or look at your chart. Right. Content also, another point on all that, right, is content really has evolved from being academic. Certainly there's still purposes for white papers and things along those lines, but content's evolved largely from being academic.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about our big brains. It really is about being relatable.
Right.
It really is about building relationship and letting people get to know who you are, both professionally and personally.
Yeah.
Because clients are going to do business with people they know, like, and trust, right? So,
what I tell everybody is it's social media. It's meant to be social. Okay. Our website is our platform where you go for all of the professional data, all that type of material. That's what your website exists for. Your social media shouldn't be a mirror of your website 100%, right?
Yeah.
There's correlation, there's connection because that's part of your brand. But if you're not using social media to be social, then you're just simply not using it. I tell everybody, when you're on LinkedIn or any other platform and you're scrolling, would you stop for your own content? Are you interested in your own content?
Right.
Because if you're not, then that's a problem.
Yeah.
It needs to be changed. You know?
That generic mind-numbing, you've got to be able to jump off that page a little bit.
Scroll. And the thing is what is making you stop, and not just stop, but what would make you comment on a post? Yeah. What makes you engage with a post? And if you're not taking those elements and creating your content around the things that are stopping you and that you want to engage in, then you're just doing yourself a great disservice. And to further that point, we talk about the why personalized, and it really just kind of carries over. I always use this anecdote when I'm talking to clients where it's very easy to belittle social media, right? Especially when it's not filled with information, when it's not, an educational article, a scholarly, link. However, that's not what most of us utilize it for, number one. Number two, we've all been online for how long now? Charlie, you and I just spoke about this. The boomer generation's been on for, actively, I would say at least 10 years. Gen Xers, since the 90s. And I mean, millennials grew up on the internet, and the way that we find professionals has shifted so greatly, especially the past few years, where if you told me 10 years ago, oh, I found a financial advisor on Facebook and that's where I hired them, people would laugh at you, right? They would think it's ridiculous. But now, where do we look? Because like you said, this is such a saturated profession. It's so saturated, okay? Yeah. So when I want to hire somebody, when I want to decide where I'm spending my money, where I'm investing my money, I want to know who you are, and I want to know easily. I don't want to have to dig. I don't want to have to look around. I want to be able to go to your LinkedIn, do a scroll, and say, that's the kind of person that I would feel comfortable working with, aside from your accreditations and achievements, because let's be honest, a lot of advisors have very similar, whatever school you went to, whatever your degree.
Yeah, CFPs and different designations.
It's all standard, you know what I mean? It's that aside, I think I told you I had been looking for a lawyer, and I was on TikTok one day and I came across this one, and in my head I'm like, Lindsay, do not click on this person. Do not, you're not finding a lawyer on TikTok. And I'm telling you, I had 2 consultations with this woman because I knew who she was.
Yep.
I knew she was somebody I could sit across from a table and feel comfortable and confident in.
Yep.
Because number one, she cared.
Yeah. She
was on there. She was creating content. She was involved in the content. She cared. She was relevant. And I got a feel for the type of person that she was.
Absolutely.
Through that. And because of that, there could have been 20 lawyers in a 5-mile radius of her, 1,000 times more qualified, but she got my phone call because I knew who she was and I didn't know who they were.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at now.
You talk about, you're right. I was on a panel at Jolt, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, a couple months ago in Vegas. And I said, maybe 250 people attended the panel. It was, it was good conversation. When do we stop referring to it as social media and understand that it's just the way people communicate, right? Yeah. I mean, I've got my wedding anniversary is this Thursday. So I gotta find some nice stuff for Carmen, right? So 15 years of the crystal anniversary. So anyway, I got a little work to do before Thursday. They're not home right now, so it's good. Um, I met her on MySpace. Carmen and I met on MySpace, right? I mean, hell, I used it to find my wife, So that's anyway. So that's maybe a little too much information,
Hey,
but
no,
to your,
I'm getting married
point,
next week, and I'm my fiance on Instagram. So
yeah.
never in a million years did I think I would say that.
Yeah, right. So, to your point, it's not this other thing anymore. And as a Gen Xer turning 50 this year, who would be, an ideal prospect candidate for a lot of advisors, I've been using it for a long time,
Right.
Anyway, so to your point there, I want to talk a little bit about why we like LinkedIn for content marketing. And then I want to jump into the why, or actually, we're talking about the why. I want to jump into the how in a second here. And, that's your area of expertise. So at that point, I shut up. Tough for me to do, but I'll try. So we're going to talk a little bit about Post Party a little bit later on, right? It's a piece of software that we're partnered in with 5 other agencies. It's awesome. It follows an engagement pod concept, which is basically put your post out there and you get a lot of interaction on your post based on Post Party. And then that tips the platform algorithms to show your content to a much, much larger portion of your network. It's a great piece of software, but the partners in that are great for the software, but we also do a ton of research together. So there are globally 9 billion views of content on LinkedIn every week. That's almost 40 billion views of content a month. A third of the LinkedIn network resides in North America. So I'm drawing conclusion here. LinkedIn hasn't said we show 3 billion content views in North America, but a third of that network being in North America, there's about 3 billion views of content in North America every single week. Lindsay, less than 2% of the network shares content consistently.
Yeah.
When it comes to the financial services industry, the majority do it very, very poorly, right? It is can set it and forget it stuff, right? So the opportunity on LinkedIn, not to mention that that's where most advisors' audiences hang out, right? So business owners, plan sponsors, pick a professional target that it's there. If you're after only retirees, don't worry about LinkedIn. Right. But if you're after a professional target pre-retiree, by all means, that's your number one platform. And the content marketing opportunity on LinkedIn is incredible. Right. I put polls out there that, routinely get 7, 8, 9,000 impressions.
Yep.
A basic post. I got about 8,000 people in my network. A basic post of mine is going to get in excess of 4,000 impressions. It's going to get, 40 comments and 50 interactions, right? And, so the content marketing opportunity on LinkedIn is really second to none as far as social media platforms are concerned. And so if you don't have a content plan on LinkedIn, you need one, and you need one quick. And don't let it be, I'm not here to bag on other companies, right? That certainly isn't it. But we really focus on building native content as well. I'll let you speak to that in a little bit. Native versus third-party links. Right. Stop sharing third-party links. If you stop sharing third-party links as generated by, StreamYard or Up Content or some of the pre-approved firm stuff, if you stop sharing those third-party links and only focus on content on the platform, consumed on the platform, your exposure doubles.
Yep.
That simple step will double your exposure just because LinkedIn doesn't want to send anybody anywhere else, right? They retain eyeballs because it translates to ad dollars. Right. So it's important that you're sharing content that is designed to be consumed right there.
Right.
So, Lindsay, let's, probably enough of me blabbing on, right? Let's start with, we'll talk about outsourcing and using a service like Social Advisors. We don't want to turn this into a sales pitch, but certainly I want you to know the options there. Let's talk about someone who wants to create personalized content in-house, right? They want to do it for themselves. And certainly they're the best person to create their content.
Right.
Now, they may not have the expertise in that arena, but they're the best ones to tell their own story. Certainly we can get to know people well enough to tell their story. Most of our clients are not local, right? So it's difficult to go create a video of them and things along those lines. So that advisor is the best person, our staff member, there's the best person to create content, frankly.
Right.
Again, we'll get to outsourcing because we'd love to do it for you. But if they're doing that, where do they start? What do they think about, right? How do they start creating content for themselves?
So to me, my first thing is who am I talking to? Who's my audience, right? It seems basic, but like you said, it comes down to like your niche, like who have you really narrowed it down to? We've got advisors who their demographic is 25 to 35-year-old, post med school graduates, just starting their career. You're not going to write content to them the same as you would write content to post retirees. Like we've got another advisor who really reaches out to people who are already retired and really just don't know how to spend the money that they've saved for retiring. So first off, it's how old are they? What kind of language do they use? What's a relatable place to come from? What part of what I do when I'm getting in touch in my meetings is I find out who they are, what's your life story, what have you been through? You're going to relate to people who have maybe been through same things. Like, okay, so you're divorced. All right, you know what? We have one advisor who, he told me, he was like, hey, people who have been divorced, sometimes they don't know what to do with their finances at that point because the lawyers don't help you with that. And you're left with 401ks and savings and all these things that you're trying to make, which way. So again, what part of your story is relatable? Yeah. Can you tie that into your audience? Okay. Your audience is key. Number one. Number two, after you break down your audience, how do you want to come across? How do you want people to perceive you? Are you all business? Are you the type that goes to work in a suit and tie every single day? Everything is strictly professional. Are you more laid back? Are you more like, hey, I'll meet you for coffee and we'll talk and it's more casual? Are you very empathetic? Are you one of those people who's like, hey, we can have this very human meeting because sometimes some of this stuff is hard, right? Money is vulnerable to begin with. You add in estate planning, legacy planning, all these other things. It becomes a very emotional topic for people.
For sure.
So if you're a very empathetic person, it is so, so, so important that people know that about you.
Yeah, agreed.
Like I can't understate that.
Yeah.
So who are you trying to reach? If it's these C-suite executive types and you're all business and suits and ties, you're creating content that's going to appeal to them. If you are somebody who's more laid back, you're reaching out to a younger crowd, your content has to appeal to them. Knowing who you're appealing to and knowing how to build your content around that becomes a loaded question. Obviously, the language that you use, the length of your posts, the context of your posts. Somebody who's reaching out to more of a professional executive type is going to probably have more educational posts. You're probably going to have more numbers, more stats, more things like that. So it's really understanding your audience can't be understated. And then understanding how you want to be perceived because that needs to be consistent.
Yeah.
You need to have a landscape like when we create our content. We're creating typically about a month at a time. What that does is give it a consistency. You know what I mean? We're not just willy-nilly, oh, I'm going to wake up and do a status today. I'm going to wake up and post an update. It's okay. I'm planning out almost, like a month's worth of idea, and it stops you from being redundant. You're a bit more organized, and every thought just flew out of my head all at the same
time. I've been there. I've been there on stage before, Lindsay.
Yeah, no, I believe it. I think what it comes down to is, when I'm creating content, I try to be very, very aware of, is it easy to read? Is my message clear?
Yep.
Is this going to speak to the people I'm trying to speak to? Charlie, you and I spoke about that before, and you were like, maybe I need to kind of loosen up a little bit, right? Maybe I need, and I'm like, just be Charlie.
Specifically, I said I should channel my inner Gary Vee and start dropping some F-bombs.
Right. But, but that's why he does well, because Gary is just Gary.
Yeah, right.
And
Yeah,
he's like
exactly.
unapologetically himself. He's
Yeah.
educated. He's motivational. It doesn't take away from any of those things.
Yeah.
You just accept that that's who he is as a full package.
Question, Lindsay, real quick question from LinkedIn. It doesn't show me who the person is, but it says LinkedIn user. Do we storyboard content monthly? So when you and your team goes into developing content at the beginning of the month for the following month,
Right.
What's that first step? Are you creating a storyboard and filling in the gaps, or?
Yeah, it's usually something like that. I try to kind of break it down, whatever, very simplistic version. Anniversaries, birthdays, what special things are we touching on this month, right? We start with that. Beyond that, obviously you want to get your services in there, but nobody wants to be sold to. You know what
No,
I mean?
but all the same, I think it's important to highlight unique value proposition, right? If you're speaking to a specific audience, yes, about them, but also about how do you impact them.
Right. Well, and I think there's this interesting time that we're at right now, right? Where it's become along the lines of the canned content. It's kind of similar on even on the writing end, right? There's like the outline of okay, the pain point, address the pain point, this and that. And people are starting to kind of see through that as well. So we're finding ways where we need to really just be more authentic. So it's you want to outline whatever service that you're providing that you want at your forefront. How are we going to incorporate that in a way that isn't bot-like, that isn't, so there's a bit of storyboarding going on. There's for us, it's a loaded question because each client is so different. And part of what I do every single month is I sit down and I get specifics from each and every client. And I make an outline which I guess would technically be a storyboard of what their content should look like the following month. Yeah. And sometimes we looked at what worked last month. Let's do more of that. What didn't work, we're going to nix it. And when I say work, I mean, did it get a lot of engagement? Did we see any real responses from it? So yeah, I think that there has to be a level of storyboarding because otherwise you're just pulling things out of thin air.
Yeah, there's significant dates for people just about every month, right? Mm-hmm. Whether that's personal or professional, and we want to highlight the personal too. Steven's post, and I know you had lined up a post to show of Steven's later, but Steven's post about his anniversary, right? His LinkedIn post about his wedding anniversary. It's amazing how much more that type of content, how much more exposure and interaction. In fact, I think LinkedIn's got a big problem on their hands. Like, I don't know how many hundreds of millions of users they have now, right? But it's a bunch of people leveraging that platform, shouting tips and tricks into a tunnel, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so sick of reading tips and tricks for freaking everything. Here we are talking about tips for professional content marketing. But at the same time, if everything you see is a tip or 3 steps to do that or whatever, it's nauseating. And we all become pretty numb to it. Like, it doesn't get a lot of interaction. So when you put something out there about an achievement, about a significant date in your life, it gets so much more engagement and exposure because that's what LinkedIn craves. LinkedIn is a social platform. Mm-hmm. They would never call themselves a sales platform, though it is a wonderful platform for sales. It is a social platform. So the more social you become with your content, the more exposure you create, the more personal the relationships become. I mean, so even something like a wedding anniversary, that's a great post.
Well, that circles back to the whole point too of like your website has all of that factual information. It's got all your stats. It's got all of your qualifications. If you keep your LinkedIn on a heavy social, presence, somebody who connects with you socially is going to go to your website. Yeah. They're gonna, you know what I mean? And that's the point, is that when you are just always putting out like facts and tips and tricks and this, you're still not actually branding yourself. Yeah. You're still not actually telling anybody who you are, what it's like to meet with you.
Exactly.
Because I'm telling you, as a prospective client, I want to know what it's like to sit down and talk to you for that first meeting. Yeah. What does that look like? What does that feel like? And I think a part of creating content is putting yourselves in the shoes of a prospective client and what do they want to know? What do you want to know before you meet somebody? You know what I mean? And it's not just your credentials. It's not just what tips or tricks. And it's not to say don't do the tips or tricks. I think that when it's something of value,
Yep.
absolutely pop it in there.
Yeah. It
You know,
reinforces your expertise. You need to do that. Don't get me wrong, right? I mean, that's an
there's value
important part.
behind
Yeah.
it. Sure. But I think it should be mostly social where you can still tie in what you do. I mean, it's networking,
Yeah.
it's being social, you know.
Uh,
So part of why we get so excited when we see an anniversary post because you're like, oh my God, this is real.
yeah.
This is a real thing, and this is
Uh,
exciting. This is beautiful, you know.
I like highlighting resource partners, right?
Yeah.
You know, we got a webinar coming up with Marie next week, Marie Swift next week, highlighting those types of relationships. And before we go any further, Stephanie, thanks for joining us. Stephanie Roberts, my friend, asked, do you have a specific program you recommend for pushing out content across the different channels and for scheduling it?
So I don't know, do you want me to discuss our programming or
Yeah, yeah, we can certainly talk about Sharp Spring and yeah, go for it.
yeah, I mean, Sharp Spring is new for me. I know we use that for a multitude of things, and a lot of it I don't personally have a hand in. I know on my own I've used other programs like Later, Planoly. Those are
Yeah.
good ones.
But
Those,
Buffer,
yeah.
Hootsuite. Yeah.
I would say there's like at least 5 or 6 out there. Later is the one that I've used most recently to post multi-platform, and it's very user friendly. It's one of those things, especially if you have like a virtual assistant or something, you pop them on there.
Mhm.
You know, I think those are good things to have. I think it's important to have a presence on most venues of social media, but also knowing where it's most important. You know, like you said, like a lot of people are using LinkedIn. We have a few clients that lean toward Instagram because they've got a younger demographic that they're reaching, or they do both, which I think
Yep.
is always a smart idea.
Yeah.
I mean, Facebook still important, but
Yeah, I think it's good to have a presence there for sure. It doesn't take a lot of energy to get that presence built. There's other purposes for Facebook, but I do want to talk about, again, you and Mindy told me not to, but I'm going to anyway. Stephanie, I want to tell you very specifically about, like, really honestly, a specific case that came up yesterday. It was an issue we had the end of last week. So we use a scheduler whenever we can. It makes our life simple, right? We had a client that we were scheduling content for, and the exposure of that content was much, much less than we expected it to be. Like dramatically fell off a cliff less. And so, brought the team together. What's going on here? And I'm familiar with shadow banning from Instagram, right? I mean, that's kind of where shadow banning first came up some years ago at this point.
right.
Where if you were abusing the platform, Instagram maybe thought you were a bot. And so they were just limiting your exposure. Well, I'm pretty sure we came across a case of that on LinkedIn. No, I can't confirm it. We did a couple of things. One of those things was we scheduled the next post manually. We didn't schedule it. We posted it and it changed. Like the metrics came back immediately. So I am going to keep a very close eye on it because I fear that the scheduled post actually, and this is isolated, right? We got a lot of clients. This is one isolated client. My fear is that the scheduled post is another way that LinkedIn's looking for bots. So
I think it's one of those things where you can't be completely hands off of any of it. Where the reason that we caught this, right, is because everything is monitored. We always monitor analytics. It's important to know how things are performing, and if they're not performing well, how can we fix this? And that's essentially what we did. So even if you use a platform like Later, Planoly, or anything like that, it's important that you do either look at your internal statistics on LinkedIn, or if the planner offers any of those statistics as well, and say, okay, is this just getting lost into the void? Is it getting flagged as a bot? Some people, like you said, I think it's kind of a crapshoot because you never know what's going to get flagged. In Instagram years ago, it was the hashtags. If you kept using repeating hashtags, it was getting picked up and flagged, and so it's. But it's one of those mysteries. It's one of those things you go into a little Google rabbit hole, and there's a lot of different ideologies behind it. But I think it's important that whether it's shadow banning or whether it's something of the like, that you are on top of your analytics to know when something is not being seen.
Yeah. And so Stephanie mentioned, I don't know if you can see that chat box there, Lindsay,
Yeah,
but yeah, we're on 5 platforms. So it's, it's all kind of pulling into one chat box. But, Stephanie, I think there is a degree of that happening, that the exposure is limited. And that kind of is a nice segue into discussing how to gain greater exposure. And of course, we love post party. But any other tips that you can give, Lindsay, for even aside from post party, and I'll give a little information on how they can find more info on post party in a second here, but any tips even beside post party engagement pods that you can give for when you create content, how to gain a greater exposure for that content and greater interaction?
So I think, you kind of hit a nail on the head before with some of our like affiliate partnering and things like that. No man is an island, right? So part of our building our network is acknowledging who's in that network, and who you're working with. And I think that helps to build some engagement as well. It helps to kind of start a conversation.
Love it.
I loved, especially one of our own, Beth McGill, creating content just with like our meetings with her. Genuinely like a very fulfilling. I really truly adored that, and I'm looking forward to doing that again soon.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important too because it's you kind of are who you work with as well, right? But it opens the door to conversation. And I think with anything that we do, it used to be, ask an open-ended question or ask people to share or this or that. And I think honestly, what I'm noticing right now is like the more relatable that you are, the more real that you are, the more that people engage. I mean,
I agree.
Charlie, I see it on your posts, when we do, I think it was Eden's birthday recently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you get huge responses because people, they care about you, they care about your family, they care, and I think part of what people engage in is what they feel is real and what they feel is genuine. I'm not going to stop to engage on a post that feels like salesy, or even if it's tips, I'm not going to engage on a post about tips.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It's like, okay, cool. I might save this. I might send it to somebody, and sending it to somebody is still great for you. That still helps you in your algorithm. But if you want some engagement, you want people interested, I think relating on a very real level, and this is very bare bones and it's not prescribed. There's really no simple answer to it because it's not prescribed. But I think, again, when it comes down to that branding question, I think that the more that you are branded, the better that you're branded, the more engagement that you'll see because your community is going to be more defined. The more defined your community, the more that people are going to interact. They're going to have conversations. I'm not going to go to some very generalized person's page and interact on their posts.
Right.
There's just no way.
Yeah.
But somebody who's very personable.
What is there even to engage with?
Exactly.
Right. And the people that are engaging probably want something from them.
Right. And a lot of times when you're engaging with somebody, if you don't know them, it's because you feel like you know them. On some weird social media level, you feel like you know them.
Yeah.
Right. But 9 times out of 10, if you don't have that kind of kinship, that draw to that person, there is no reason for you to engage in that post whatsoever. And I think
you talk about community, right? Tagging businesses, tagging people you're associated with, hashtags, I think as well. Being present.
Yeah.
Right. So if there's someone who comments on your content and asks you a question, get in there, soon after, right? Be present so you can respond. LinkedIn's going to put your content in front of more people,
right?
Simply because you're present. They can help start a conversation. They got to create engagement too. Right. I mean, it's in their best interest to put content out there that creates engagement. So if you're there participating in that engagement, you're going to get more exposure for that. Now, you can't do that all the time,
of course,
but I log in a couple times a day just to check notifications, make sure. And, there's a selfish kind of voyeur kind of, who's looking at my profile kind of thing to it too. Right. Makes it kind of feel cool. Yeah. But certainly, it increases your exposure just to be present. Lindsay, let me ask you, we've discussed this internally, call to action or no call to action on posts?
I think that there does not need to be a call to action on every post.
I agree.
I feel like this was like an old school kind of I say old school probably 2 years ago, right? But this was a belief that every post needed a call to action.
Yeah.
I don't believe every single post needs a call to action. I think that some posts just need to be. I have a firm belief. You look at the people who do content well, they do it well because you see them all the time, right? All the time. And that's really, I'm not saying you should live on social media or anything like that. What I'm like, to reiterate what you said about having a presence, right, is not to overthink your content so much. I think we have this tendency to overcomplicate, to not want to come across as vapid or shallow, which, spoiler, we're going to come across how we're going to come across to some people regardless, right? Everyone's got their own feeling on social media. We all want to be perceived as genuine, and we do the best we can to be perceived that way, but you can't control everyone's perception. So that aside, being visible is so, so, so important. So if you are overthinking your content to the point of like not posting as regularly as you should be, or perfectly curating each post, listen, these aren't blogs. This isn't your website.
Right.
It's a piece of content that someone's going to consume like that.
Yep.
And I think that you need to be present. You need to just have some content that's just content. You know what, Charlie? You had this great, reflective moment after a road trip, and you felt like, hey, I want to kind of share this because I feel like someone might relate to this. Somebody might get this. Somebody might. So now you're social, you're human, and it does relate into who you are as a businessman. Yeah. Right. And I think content like that I think does much better than a lot of this other stuff. People overthink. They don't want to post it. They don't end up posting it. And I feel like we undervalue some of the most valuable content that just kind of like ends up existing in our own minds.
We're a lot of us are really busy demonstrating how smart we are.
Yeah.
And that's not the content that matters, right?
Well, that's sure. When I sit down for these branding meetings with our clients, they want to tell me all about, their achievements, and it's great. And I tell it's great. It's wonderful and it's great. But I need to separate what you do from who you are. That's where I come in.
Well, and that's the stuff that resides on their profile. So someone who's interested is going to go look at that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some of that resides right in the headlines. You can see it right above the post,
right?
Certainly on the website, right? So you don't have to pound your chest with content, right? I mean, content's about being real. So before we run out of time, and I don't know how, but I ended up with a meeting right on the tail end of this too. So I got 14 minutes.
Hey, you had a meeting right now.
Exactly, right? We've got some great resources. So Post Party, you can learn more about Post Party at socialpostparty.com. Here's what it is. It's really simple. There's no commitment to it, month to month, right? It takes the engagement pod concept, which, if you're not familiar with that, is you gathering 20 of your friends and all deciding you're going to post at 9 a.m. on Wednesday and then interact with each other. Great concept. The problem with that is you can invite 25 people to an engagement pod and 3 people will show up consistently. Right. So it's really hard to get an engagement pod that's organized and generates
accountability.
Yeah. It just, so it's like, it's just the lack of consistency. So what we did was, with these partners I referred to earlier, we have Social Post Party, and we run 8 parties a week, 3 on Monday, 3 on Wednesday, 2 on Friday. And all that is they're scheduled engagement pods, right? So you make your post at noon on Wednesday, you copy the link, you put it in the website. And that the website puts it out to 15 people or other also in that party, randomized, right? You get the link to 15 people. So if there's 150 people in a party, it's all completely randomized. And you take about 30 minutes and you engage with 15 posts, and they engage with 15 people engage with your post. And that early interaction drives your post in front of a lot of eyeballs. The other resources I want to share, and I'm going to share my screen real quick to do this. Bear with me one second here while I make sure that I am. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Just, hey, new technology. It's my third time using StreamYard. Look at that, all the way up into the distance. So this is our website. And Lindsay, can you see our website up there?
I can.
Okay, cool. So we got some good resources right here. We've got a 365-day content calendar. So if you struggle with creating content, coming up with different things to talk about every day, this is a really great resource that every weekday you're going to have a new prompt for content. The other one that I really like is we did a case study on 3 clients, and we looked at the 10 posts after they were personalized and the 10 posts prior to being personalized. And what that demonstrated to us was that there's actually, on average of these guys, and I'm sorry, too many things going on in my brain and my hands at the same time. There's an engagement of 850% on average, more engagement on personalized content than on non-personalized content. We studied 3 of our clients and looked at 10 posts that were just generalized shared posts, and then 10 posts that were built around who they were. 850% more engagement just by personalizing content, and that's specifically on LinkedIn.
Right.
So, I mean, it really, not only is it tell a nice story, it is super effective in creating engagement with, you got 1,000 people in your network. Well, a good portion of those people are going to align with you and who you are as a person and a professional. You don't have to share the latest canned content, right? So just a more concerted effort in building your brand and influencing this large network. And hopefully you're sending out some invites every day. That's what we talked about last week in building your community. The content's designed to influence that community. So the website, if you want to download those things, are social-advisors.com. So a few good resources for you there. So.
And Charlie, if I may, because I know we have just
absolutely. No, go for it. Yeah, of course.
This is my little shameless self-promotion where we talk about why you outsource. Why are you coming to us? Why are you coming to me specifically? When I came into this position, we were kind of feeling it out exactly what it would be. And I decided that I wanted to do for clients what I had done for myself previously, being, still a photographer, but, no longer full-time. I built a business from the ground up. I did every single part of it. And I'd like to think that as far as social media branding, I was kind of there in the earlier days of making it a personalized look and less of the professional front. The thing is, people are busy, number one. Number two, when your car's broken, you can Google how to fix it. There's a million you can get a book, or you can just pay the mechanic, because that's what the mechanic does. That's what they're the expert at, right? We are the experts of branding, of helping you get your voice out there. I'm not your voice. I want to find your voice. I want to find your aesthetic. I want to know who you are. I want to know how you went to that.
Well, and you're speaking to an industry that has been battling the do-it-yourselfers for a long time, right? I mean, 10 years ago, maybe more, there was a lot of debate on whether the robo-advisor, the do-it-yourself platforms, would replace financial advisors. It doesn't, right? I mean, it especially in times like this where people are getting hurt. Right. And the economy has turned, and you're kind of preaching to the choir, because you're not an expert in building portfolios.
Right.
You're going to go use a robo advisor. Well, who do you turn to when the chips are down? Right. So it is about leveraging the expertise of others, so you have time to be the expert that you are.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So, and listen, I hope that there's some value in this conversation. There's some good takeaways. Thank you for the questions that came in. And we do this every Tuesday at 2. It's fairly new for us. A couple of weeks in, we're still figuring out StreamYard, and, I still got to integrate Zoom and StreamYard. We'll get that figured out at some point too. But every Tuesday at 2, we bring a new topic. We'll go live across platforms. And then once a month, we're bringing in a guest. And next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time, I am super stoked that Marie Swift at Impact Communications is joining us. We're going to talk about a presentation called Tales from the Trenches. It'll be more conversational than presentational, but really just a discussion on what's working in marketing for advisors today. I'm sure we will talk a lot about highly personalized content. So that's on the 26th. And then on the 28th, I think at noon Eastern time, I believe it is. I should probably have this stuff in my hands. I'll be on a panel with Advisor Websites, and Katie Braden will be there, Matt Halloran. Anyway, so that'll be a good panel. And again, that's another discussion about personalizing that brand. Get away from the canned content. It actually has a negative impact on your brand today. It used to be good just to hold space. Not so good anymore. So huge thanks to everybody who turned out today. It's fun in StreamYard. I don't even know where we get our numbers from, but I can see numbers flashing up and down. while we're looking at our screen, Lindsay.
I get none of that.
I don't know where they're pulling from, right? You don't see any of that. Again, we're getting used to some new technology, so it's cool. But it's a great software. I love it already. Lindsay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Charlie. It was fun.
Yeah, lots of great insight. And I'm sure we'll touch base this afternoon or tomorrow. And everybody who took some time out of their day to join us, thank you. That is valuable and precious. We appreciate you sharing it with us. Cheers. Bye.